Today on episode 116 of the Big Seance podcast, it's another road trip. Follow me to Belvoir Winery, also known as the Odd Fellows Home.
Welcome to the Big Seance podcast. I'm Patrick Keller of BigSeance.com, and this is a place for an open discussion on all things paranormal, but specifically topics like ghosts and hauntings, paranormal research, spirit communication, psychics and mediums, and life after death. So basically, anything that pops up in my paranormal world. The candles are already lit, so you might as well come on in and join the seance.
We're going to take the parlor on the road today as Joe and I stay the weekend at the beautiful Inn at Belvoir Winery in Liberty, Missouri. I plan on roaming around the place and taking you with me. We'll get to hang out with Jesse Leimkuehler, who with his wife owns the property, and I hear I might even get the opportunity to also talk with Keith of PRI, who organizes weekend ghost hunts at Belvoir. I've been there before and had some cool experiences. At BigSeance.com in the past, I've blogged quite a bit about Belvoir, and I've taken lots of photos there as well. But anything you need to know about Belvoir Winery, including events coming up with Amy Bruni, or even our friend Chip Coffee, you can go to BelvoirWinery.com. You can also check out strange-escapes.com. I have a feeling this is going to be a big episode, so let's get to it.
So I'm here at Belvoir Winery, which was the Odd Fellows Home, was an orphanage, and I'm trying to be quiet because my room is actually upstairs, and it's kind of, it reminds me of the Stanley Hotel and the fact that you could hear everything. So, you know, everything's hardwood floors and you can hear people out in the halls, and I didn't want to be too nerdy and have people hear me. So down here on the second floor, it's just like an event space down here. And then the floor below us is the main floor with the winery. And it's pretty cool. I love the tile down there. The windows are awesome. The doors are awesome. The railings. The last time I was here, 3 or 4 years ago, there was no inn here. It was just the main level, that's one level below me, with the winery. It's like a little bar, and they had a few rooms for events, and Amy Bruni had several ghost hunters events here, and that's what I was here the first time for. So the upper floors, this floor and the floor where I'm staying above this floor, was still in its like abandoned form, looking pretty rough, kind of spooky. Ghost Adventures has been here. Ghost Hunters has been here. So it's been on several TV shows. The last time I was here, we had lots of flashlight activity. And I remember us being in a circle singing, children's songs and feeling like we had someone singing along with us from the responses we were getting on the flashlights. And I don't really remember the Ghost Hunters episode where they were here several years back before it was the inn. But I do remember, as much as the Ghost Adventures dudes get on my nerves, they had a very good episode here. And at the time, they said it was one of the coolest experiences they'd had one of the best investigations. That's when they found some of the stuff in the walls. Anyway, I meet with the owner, Jesse, and I interview him tomorrow. So we're staying here for 2 nights. So we're here tonight and tomorrow night. And I look forward to interviewing him and see what he has to say about, activity that's been going on lately, and learn a little bit more about the Odd Fellows Home and the Belvoir Winery.
Well, I am here, sitting here. I learned that I was going to say that we're both sitting here over spirits, the drinking kind of spirits, but I learned that my wine is not spirits.
It is not.
So I learned that's how cool I am with winery and liquor and alcohol, because I'm just not cool enough to know those things. But yes, this is the first time that I've sat live with someone in a different parlor. We're here at the Belvoir Winery and had actual drinks.
Yes, it's fabulous.
This is history.
Yes.
In the making. But I'm here with Jesse Leimkuehler, and he is along with his wife, the owner of Belvoir Winery, which is also known as just like Odd Fellows Home, right?
Usually. Correct. Yes.
And so a lot of people know it as the big Odd Fellows property in Liberty, Missouri. And I've been here before, and if you listen to a few past episodes, or if you are from the days of when I was blogging, you know that like 4 years ago I came out here for I don't think it was technically Amy Bruni's event, but it was a Ghost Hunters event at that time, and Chip Coffey was here, and I think Britt from Ghost Hunters was here, Adam Berry was here, and we did some investigating, and it was super cool. And that was before the inn, and of course now there's an inn here. And Joe and I have been staying here this weekend, and it's been wonderful. And the place is beautiful. It is absolutely beautiful. It's completely different than when we were here before. And you guys have grown a lot since then. So I'm totally excited to talk about everything paranormal, history, the events coming up. So welcome to your event room, your ball. No, this is the salon.
Yeah, well, this one's called the 1900 room.
So the 1900 room.
Yes, because the building was built in 1900, so that's why we named it that. But cool. Yeah, this is one of our event spaces that we use for things like weddings and stuff like that. So we probably have a nice echo on the recording.
Probably,
would be my guess.
But I want to bring people here, so I want them to hear what we hear, and so that's going to be just fine. And we're looking outside of beautiful, historic 4-paned windows into the dark. So
yeah, you can practically actually stand up in the windows. I can stand up in the windows and not hit my head. That's how big they are.
They're huge, and you can sit in them too. You can sit right in the ledge.
Yes,
pretty cool. So let's start with Belvoir Winery, and you guys pretty much started things in, I think you said 2008.
Yes, correct. The renovation started in 2008. Our family, which my wife's parents, they actually bought the place in 1993 from the Odd Fellows. At that time, it was just a nursing home at that point. And so they actually purchased the site and all the property surrounding it. And then they actually ran the nursing home for about like 6 months, and then eventually shut that down. And then their sole intent after that was to turn it into, a winery and a bed and breakfast and that kind of stuff. And so we started the initial renovation in 2008, even though we had been growing grapes for 10, 12 years already at that point, making wine. At that point, it was just unlicensed wine, so we just take it home and drink it, basically. And then once we started doing the renovation, it took about 2.5 years for the first renovation. And, we did a historic renovation, with a lot of the old elements involved. We have the original tile floor. We have a lot of the stairs. The staircase is amazing. And
I've taken a lot of photos of just the staircase.
Yeah,
itself.
I mean, it's something that, you bring in engineers for today and they say that's, it's like a fortress. They just don't build it like that anymore because it's just so cost prohibitive. I mean, it's just steel. I mean, it's just unbelievable. Mm-hmm. And so, we kept a lot of those elements so people could come and experience what it used to be. But yet at the same time, we've renovated it out to where we can use it for things like events and stuff like that. And then, about 3 years ago, we started renovation of the upper 2 floors. We started with the original floor in the basement first, and then 3 years ago, we started the upper floors. It was just kind of a cost prohibitive type thing. We couldn't do it all at once. And so now we've added new ballroom spaces for the weddings and things like that up here. And then, of course, where you guys are staying in the inn, we have a 9-room inn with overnight accommodations. It's really cool because it's historically renovated, but it's kind of got a modern feel to it. It's kind of weird like that. And the other thing is in the rooms, you have angles in the rooms where you're actually up in the eaves of the roof, so it feels like you're in an old building and in the attic of an old building, but yet it's still, very comfortable and things like that. So
it's funny you say angles because Joe and I were talking about that just a little while ago, but it's not just, the dormer room window kind of, bump out. There's some cool angles to it that are, it's really interesting. And you were telling me that your wife is who we give credit to for like the style and design. It is this entire building, and particularly the event space now in the inn. It is beautiful. I mean, absolutely beautiful. And it's just a hint of like modern comfort and it just perfectly blends in with the rest of the building, the history and everything. The
kind of neat part about the renovations is the original renovation, which was on the first floor. It was done by my wife's father. Her mother had passed away just before they started renovation, but her father was around. And so what he did was kind of his take on what this building should be. And it's definitely more historic looking, I mean, there's a lot, he's got some chandeliers down there. The wood is very, woody, for lack of a better way of saying it. The trim is all wood stain instead of paint. The wood floors are original and, beautiful wood floors and things like that. Whereas if you come up to the second and third floor, it's very historic because, I mean, we're sitting right now on floors that are 120 years old. And they look like they just got laid yesterday. Just because all you did was sand them down. I mean, literally they were funky looking and all we did was sand it down and make it beautiful again. But yet we still have some paint on the trim up here and stuff like that, which actually historically the trim would have been painted when the orphans were here and things like that. So it definitely lends itself to what it was originally. But yeah, we have some nice features, that make it appealing to brides and grooms and, things like that want to come out and run their events out here today.
So the property of Belvoir Winery actually has multiple buildings, and we'll talk about some of those other buildings, but I don't think Jesse just mentioned that it was an orphanage. And so the main building, the winery itself, it started out as an orphanage and then was the orphanage for the whole length of time, right? It wasn't anything
correct. Yeah.
else.
It was like from 1895, which it was actually in a different building, which used to be there was a hotel that was built here in 1880, and that building was all wood, and it was sold to the Odd Fellows in 1895. And then almost this day, it was Valentine's Day in 1900, the all wood structure burned down. No lives were lost or anything in the situation, but basically a cook came and there was a frozen pipe. He went to heat it up with a blowtorch and ended up catching the structure on fire and burning down the entire building.
Maybe not the wisest way to...
Yes, there could have been better options available. I think maybe rub your hands together and hold the pipe or something. I don't know, but so yeah, he burned down the building, and it's an unfortunate situation, obviously. But the good news is that they rebuilt it, and they built this structure, which at the time it was considered one of the most fire resistant structures in the United States. I mean, the brick walls are 18 inches. I mean, it's an absolute fortress now, and so that. Then from 1900 to the mid-50s, 1955, this building was an orphanage, and it held up to 350 orphans in its heyday. And then in the 60s after that, they basically what happened was there was the advent of child protective services and welfare. So they didn't need the facilities for that anymore. So once they switched it over to that, then they actually, the city ran out of space in some of their schools, which is obviously common nowadays. But it happened in the 60s too. And so they actually leased this space for several years for classrooms as a school until they could build a new place. So there's actually people that come out even today that are in their 60s and they say, oh, I went to second grade in this building, and stuff like that. And there's some really neat stories from when it first started, the first month in, the kids would come in through the front door. Well, there was old folks on the first floor at that time because they were using that space for extra space for that kind of thing. And what happened was after the first month, the old folks, they would make a sport out of, they would sit by the front stairs and they would scare the kids. And so they said, oh, well, we can't drop the kids off at the front anymore. The old people are just totally terrorizing the children. And so now there's a drive on the side. And so what they did was they start dropping off the bus on the side and they would let them up this fire escape that's on the side of the building. The fire escape actually has diamond pattern in it. So you can see up through it. What happened then was that the little boys figured out that if they let the girls go in front of them, yes, then they could look up their skirts. And so then the teachers and the administration had to start, the boys would go up first and then the girls would go up second. They would go in groups to make sure that didn't happen anymore. So
some things don't change.
Yeah.
That's funny.
Yep. And then there was a haunted house that was here in the 80s. The JCs, one of those organizations, they ran a haunted house here just as a fundraiser. So, I mean, when we renovated the place, the first floor hallway where the wood is, they had a railroad track painted on it. It was homage to an old Stephen King movie that we actually talked about called Sometimes They Come Back. Yeah. And so they had a railroad track running down the hallway. So we had to literally sand the railroad track off the floor when we renovated it to get it ready. But yeah, I mean, it was a lot of things. Just this building alone, that doesn't include the other buildings.
So how long of a time period did it sit empty?
We purchased it in 93 and it was vacant until we started renovating in 2008. Now we were doing things like gutting the building on our own, I mean, basically you can gut a building just with, a sledgehammer and some anger. Basically it's all you need. So, I mean, we could come out and do it for free of charge, just gut it out. But, that's basically all we were doing. And we were growing grapes as well during that time.
Yeah.
So.
And so, just building alone, we could talk for hours about the history and the stories. And so we will bounce back and, we're going to talk about some of the paranormal activity as well. There's been TV shows and that have been here and you may have seen it, but tell us just real briefly about some of the other buildings on the property, because it's when you drive in, it's just a massive complex of buildings.
Yeah. The next building over is the nursing home. It's a building that was built in the 50s, and I actually replaced a building. There was a different building there before, and you can see it in the pictures on the first floor. It was actually a schoolhouse over there before for the orphans. And they had that there until the mid 50s, and then they had a need for more space for the older folks. So that building, it's a modern building. It doesn't really fit in. At some point, we'll take it down. It's the only building not on the National Register of Historic Places. In fact, they referenced that some in the Ghost Hunters episode when it was out here that, eventually we're going to take that down. We haven't done that yet, but it's only a matter of time, really. And then the old folks home is the next building over after that. It's an enormous building that looks just like the winery building. And, it was strictly a nursing home. It's amazing in that it was a building that was built in 1903, had 2 stories. So, I mean, the people who were on the second floor had to be mobile, there was no elevators or anything like that. And the other thing that's really cool is they didn't have air conditioning in that building. And so they actually air conditioned by, they would put blocks of ice on the windowsill, and then the wind would blow in through the windowsill across the block of ice, and that's how they'd cool the building.
Wow.
And they would have like ice trays basically on the edge. So it's a really cool aspect of that. And then the last building on the end is the old hospital building. A lot of people make the mistake that they think this used to be like a mental institution.
Yeah, I've heard that.
Yeah, and it never was. Now, that doesn't say that there might have been some old people who had some issues. I mean, they didn't segregate that kind of thing out as much as they do now. But it was an actual medical hospital. So, I mean, initially it was a private hospital where Odd Fellows and Rebecca's, which is a sister organization, and their families could use it. And then eventually they didn't use it enough. And so to make more money, they opened it up to the public. And so, it was a hospital till the 70s, for quite a while. And so even when we got the place, we went through there, and I mean, there was old pill bottles and records like sitting in the cabinets and stuff like that over
just
there.
Just waiting to be sifted through.
Yeah. And it's really neat. Obviously, it's different, the medical records now, I mean, they didn't care that they left those kind of things there just sitting in the cabinet. And so you'd see, one might have a cold, one might have the flu, all kinds of stuff. And it was pretty interesting to kind of go sifting through all that.
So in its heyday, this place was, a huge machine. I'm sure it's, the amount of employees that must have been, it blows my mind.
Yeah, at its height, it was a small city almost. There was around 450 permanent residents just on the property. And that doesn't include volunteers, paid employees, things like that. And, they, for a good chunk of time, for about 40 years or so, it was a huge place. And even the orphanage had up to 350 orphans at one time. There's a building in back that's burned down since, but they actually had power and running water out here. They created on their own before the City of Liberty even had it. So the city didn't have it, so they just went out and created it themselves, which is wonderful. I mean, it's really cool. And of course, it was a self-sufficient location in that
they lived off the land.
Yeah, they had livestock, they had crops and all that kind of stuff. And if you were poor or if you were one of the older orphans, you were expected to go out and work the land, whatever it might be, work the cattle, feed the cattle. And then the younger kids were assigned duties in the buildings, simple stuff like, cleaning the buildings, or some of them went around with carts in the old folks home and the hospital and would clean up like dirty linens and take them back to where they could be washed, and they'd get a dime for going out for the day and doing that. So, and then they actually had a candy and toy store here in the building. So if they saved up enough of their dimes, then they could go into the store and they could buy whatever they wanted.
Shut up.
Yeah. And there was a cool story too. There was the boys were on the same end as where the candy store was. And the candy store was on the first floor and the boys stayed up on the second floor. And there was an orphan that came out about 4 years ago. And he came out and was telling me that at night, one night, he and some of his friends shimmied down the drain pipe out of where they were sleeping so that the matron didn't know they were gone. I mean, it's like a story straight out of Annie, sneaking out. And they go shimmying down the drain pipe, pop out, and then they sneak in through the window where the candy and toy store is located. And they went and ate for like 2 hours, just ate candy and played with the toys, just basically ransacked this place. And, they of course got whipped hellaciously the next day when
you can't play that off when there's 2 hours of good eating.
Oh, man. Yeah. And he said, they got punished very severely, he said, but he wouldn't have changed it for the world because he had so much fun, just going and getting to play with all the stuff. And he said he probably ate like 3 pounds of candy, So it's really cool stories. I mean, I've met a few of the orphans. It's really cool to get to meet them and hear their stories too.
Yeah, I've heard some of those stories too. And it's a time period where there's people, still living who either grew up here or had some role, in this building. So that must be an interesting. Do you get them to jot down their memories? And
well, usually they can't jot down the memories. So usually, like if anybody like that comes in this building, I grab a yellow notepad and a pen. Yeah. Because there was like one time I took a guy through and took him down the basement where they used to have like they would have the cafeteria and they would eat down there. And now there's a giant air moving unit down there in the basement. And we walked down there and he pointed over to where the air movement unit was. And he said, that's where I sat right there for lunch every day. He says, I remember that I was sitting there when I found out that the Japanese bombed Pearl Harbor. And it was a total chill moment. I mean, it was amazing. Wow. That was a moment in time, like a 9/11 or something like that. That was the moment in time that he remembered. I was sitting down here in what's now this basement that's full of wine, basically. And I was sitting there, and that's when Pearl Harbor became real to me, and that's really cool. You don't get to hear those kind of moments very often.
Right. So we also have the creepier elements of the history of this building. I mean, there's a human skeleton, in your building.
Yeah, George.
And how does the paranormal kind of start? When does that start coming in? And when do people, I don't know, do you start hearing stories? And how, we eventually led to ghost hunters and ghost adventures being here, investigating, and a lot of cool Paranerd opportunities to come and see Amy Bruni and Adam Berry and at some of the events here. But how did all of that start? How did we get into that world?
Yeah. Well, I mean, even when we purchased a property, there was always like information circling around the community, because honestly, the nursing home was still going at that time. And there was, even when the nursing home was here, there was a lot of talk of paranormal activity, even in the nursing home areas. They would have footsteps in the hallway when they weren't there. They would have rooms where someone had passed away, and, you know, there would be activity that was going on after those people had been moved out of there, you know, and, you know, no telling if it was those people that passed away or if it was something previous, you know, but there were nurses that would not go in certain areas of the building, you know, at certain times of the day. Even now we have nurses that come out sometimes and they say, hey, you know, when I was out here, you know, I had those kind of situations go on. So, I mean, there was that before, and then we purchased it, and it became kind of an urban folklore kind of thing, where people would come out and, you know, I mean, they're inherently spooky buildings, for lack of a better way of saying it. They're really cool buildings, but they're spooky. They look like they belong in a horror movie or a thriller movie, you know? And so, you know, we have people sneak in and things like that, you know, just trying to get that moment there where they might be in a haunted place.
Mm-hmm.
We didn't really have that many experiences initially as a family when we were dealing with it. But when we started renovation in earnest and we were out here a lot more often, that's when we started, you know, experiencing more things. And it was just little things, you know, and it's one of those things that in your mind, you write it off. You know, you say, I mean, I call myself an interested skeptic. I'm not so much that way anymore, because I've been in a haunted building for quite a while now.
Mm-hmm.
But at the start, I was more an interested skeptic in that I thought it was a cool concept, but I didn't know if it was real or not, you know? And so, you know, you would hear things in the building and you would say, oh, well, you know, wooden floor, you know, could be this, could be that. And then things start happening, you know, where there's voices, or you see something move, you know, and then later on you start seeing like apparitions and stuff like that. And you realize, okay, this isn't something I can just write off as an old building kind of thing.
But, you know, even though that wasn't very long ago, you know, just things being so accepted and the paranormal growing in popularity has really only been like the last 15 years.
Right.
So you also were in a more of a time where people didn't just talk about it as openly, I guess, as they do now, even though that was really not that long ago.
Yeah. Yeah. And I mean, you know, the interest was there quickly. And honestly, some of the initial paranormal investigations that we did, we had local groups come out. There was a couple that I trusted, you know, because obviously they're everywhere anymore, you know what I mean, but local groups everywhere. But I found a couple that were pretty trustworthy. They were TAPS affiliates and they had worked on some bigger cases. And so I brought them in. I said, hey, listen, let's just stay here for a few nights, you know, get a feel for it. I think there might be something happening, but I don't know. And, you know, they came and I mean, it was like Disneyland for them. I mean, the place just lit up on the nights when they were here and initially doing the checks, and they were like, wow, there's something pretty funny going on here, you know, and quickly the word got out about that. And so the next thing we did was we started doing the paranormal investigation events. And, you know, so often people think, oh, you know, well, this space, they're just doing that paranormal event. They don't want you to come in because, you know, they want to make so much money off that. We honestly don't make that much money off it. You know what it is? It's an outlet for people who are interested in the paranormal, or people who would otherwise sneak onto the property and possibly get arrested when they shouldn't be out here. It's an outlet for them to come out and experience everything that they want to experience out here, but they can do it in a safe environment. You know, the people that run the event, I pay them, you know, and by the time I pay them, there's not a lot of money left for us, but, you know, it ensures their safety while they're out here. And people love those events. I mean, we found them to be ridiculously popular, and we're like, oh, okay, this is more than just something little, you know? And so then as we went along, and then we started having, you know, people out to the winery for events, you know, we started having things happen at events. Things happen where people were in corners of the winery where it was quiet. And in some cases, they weren't even people that were interested in the paranormal. And they wandered into these areas and suddenly realized, oh, something just happened to me. And then they're looking for a logical explanation. And they come back to the bartender and like, I don't think that was something that was really supposed to happen.
It's interesting. There are, you know, these, you know, you could call it paranormal destinations out there that really kind of depend on the paranormal kind of as a gimmick to help them raise funds to renovate a place, to save a place. You know, sometimes it's the paranormal popularity of a place that will save it from being destroyed or demolished. And what I've noticed about this place is that you guys don't need the paranormal, and there's also not a fear of talking about it either. You don't need the paranormal activity as a gimmick. It's a cool place to be, regardless of what you're interested in. And then, hopefully you get a little tap on the shoulder when you're when you're here for whatever you're here for.
Yeah. Well, another thing I'd add too is you're talking about the paranormal. The wonderful part about paranormal, I always tell people this, is that paranormal activity is a wonderful outlet for people to learn things. And what they don't realize is they're learning about history in a lot of cases. If we didn't have the paranormal here, which obviously is not something that we create, it's not an on-demand kind of thing. It's not something where I can say, okay, it's time to come out, guys. It's not that kind of thing. But when you're talking to people downstairs, in the bar, and they're having a drink and asking you about these kind of things. The wonderful part is you can explain the paranormal aspect of it, but what it really does is it teaches them about what this place used to be and how important it was to the community and how important it was to a lot of people. And that goes for any place that's haunted, not just here. Generally speaking, if it's a haunted place, it's more often than not an older place that has a lot of history behind it. And so it's sometimes like what you do with your kids when you're doing homework. You try to distract them from what you're really trying to do, which is to teach them 2 + 2 and try to make it fun. Well, in the same aspect, we're teaching people that are drinking down at our bar a lot of new history and a lot of new information that they never had any clue existed out here before. And they wouldn't have known had they not come out here, whether it was for the wine or for the paranormal or for one of the events. There's so much that they can learn from that. And I think that's fantastic. And I that's kind of a dying situation as far as people wanting to learn more about their history. And so we do it in a fun way, in the end that teaches them a lot of those things where they didn't really come out necessarily looking for that kind of thing.
And you've really become a friend of the paranormal community. Adam Berry and Amy Bruni and Grant. Has Grant been out here?
Yes, Grant came out here last year. Yeah.
Yeah. And, Zach Bagans and Ghost Adventures. And so it's really cool. And there's events going on all over the place. And you told me that you were not afraid to go into some of the behind the scenes of, I guess, let's say just the first ghost hunters visit out here. You want to talk a little bit about how that went?
It's pretty interesting because the ghost hunters, when you see it, it's an hour. In fact, it's not an hour, right? It's like 42 minutes because you take out the commercials and things like that. But what a lot of people don't realize is that it's like a week of filming for different things. And so they come out, the first day they're kind of scouting things out. They have 1 to 2 days where they do like B-roll footage, those little clip spots where they switch from one location to the other. They literally spend 5 hours searching out all the different clips and stuff like that. They go out into the city and they film locations within the city. And then they have, it looks like one overnight stay, but what actually is they usually do 2 or 3 overnight stays, because, that gives them more opportunities to catch those kind of things.
And that's cool because scientifically they've always said that's really how you want to do it. You don't want to just go somewhere like a lot of the, local teams will go one night at a place and you can't, one night's not enough anyway to get a good picture of that.
Yeah. And so, they dive in 2-3 days. And in some cases, they may have a member of the crew that doesn't happen to make that night. And so they have to kind of splice it to make it look like that person made that night, and that kind of stuff. And so, they do a lot of investigating. They have each crew, when they go out, they have, usually 2 investigators, obviously. A lot of times, like, for example, Amy and Adam are always teamed up on ghost hunters, and Jay and, like Grant or one of those guys, they'd be teamed up as well. And so things like that, they team it up, but they also have a cameraman and a boom mic with each team as well, because they have to catch all those moments, that are happening within it. And then in addition, back here at what they call home base, which would be like in the winery building, if they're out in the other buildings, they have another person that's a producer. And that producer is sitting listening to everything that's happening in those teams. And he's marking every single spot that something happens, for review. So when they're reviewing it, they're really reviewing producer remarks and checking those kind of things. So they don't have to review all of it that way.
I knew it.
Yes.
I knew it.
They don't just sit there and watch that whole dang thing.
Because they do it so quickly.
Right. They do it in a night, and the next night they're right back at it. But the producers are back there. But like I said, they have a producer for each team. So they're listening at different locations and not even paying attention to the other producers and what's going on in those locations. They do have like a blue room. It's very rudimentary compared to, something that Taylor Swift or something like that might happen. I remember they had a table. It was like a 6-foot table like the one we're sitting at. And they had a layout. And I mean, there was just gummy bears and chips, and everybody had their own energy drink that they drank to stay up for the whole night. And I mean, it was everything that's horrible that you shouldn't be eating, but each one of them had 2 or 3 things that they have to have. Adam is a total 5-hour energy drink guy, Britt, I remember, is like gummy bears and that kind of stuff. And so it's a crazy spread of everything.
Like junk food, craft services.
Oh yeah. Yeah. Pizza would have been a health food on this table.
Wow.
I mean, it was pretty rough looking. So, I mean, they have all that kind of stuff available to them. And then, and then by like the 6th day is really when they do like the reveal. So they come back with the information. In our case, they had about 10 or 11 pieces of evidence, which is quite a bit actually. And actually they didn't even show all the evidence on the reveal on the show. They, kind of picked the ones that they thought were the best, or, that they liked my reaction or something like that, I mean, and the nice thing is none of it was faked. I mean, too often people look at these shows and say it's faked. I mean, I can tell you with great certainty it wasn't faked, but I think the editing sometimes lends people to think that, and
kind of the stagey quality of it. And that's one thing that's always, if anything has bugged me, it's that pretending like, well, the client called us and they want to know if there's activity, so we came out. That always kind of bugged me sometimes. I'm like, we know that's, we know the success of this show. Just get to the investigating, and hi, we're here, at Belvoir Winery, and we're going to do it. Were they like willing to help you out and give you evidence that just for your own benefit, that's not necessarily for the show? Like sometimes I wonder if, like, hey, this other stuff happened too, and you might want to, was there like actual paranormal help that wasn't just for production?
I would generally say no. Mm-hmm. And there's multiple aspects of that. The evidence that they showed me was just generally standard evidence. And then at the end, they addressed it. And it's interesting you bring up the whole, this person need help and that kind of thing. So for our episode, what happened is that the premise that they laid out was, listen, the building's getting knocked down next door. Jesse would like us to investigate it about the possibility of spirits, if they don't have a building there, coming into other buildings. And also just to generally give the employees at the place, a better understanding of what's going on, so that they aren't concerned about their welfare when they're working. What I would say, since the show's over, I can say this kind of stuff, is that the call was made to me for the show. They called us first, and there was no call made out to say that, hey, I'm knocking down this building. Hey, my employees are concerned. They called us because they believed it was a location that they wanted to film at that would have a good recording. And then what happens is that they kind of talk about, well, what do you really want to do here? And then and I just said I generally wanted to better understand what's going on here. And, and then the producer that I was talking with was he was in California, and he said, he says, well, we kind of want something a little more substantive to have our they don't want it to just be, okay, he wants to know what's going on, because because
they've done that before.
Right. If every episode's like that, then they don't have it. So, they're like, well, are your employees concerned? Is there a certain building you're worried about? So I explained that I was going to take down the building. And so then they kind of built in that driven story to the building. And they said that I called in the episode, which is fine. The end result is everything that you see in the episode is legitimate, and it's not affected by the story that they build or don't build within the episode. It creates a good story, but in the end, it's a very, it's driven based on what they find, I mean, that's really what's important to the viewers. It's not whether they saved me from, the ghost, or saved the employees from the ghost, or anything like that. What's really important is what they did in the time, the 30 minutes in between the start and the end. That's the most important part of it. And they did a really good job of that, and they produced it very well. I mean, Ghost Hunters is a well-produced show. And I mean, all the other ones follow that mold at some level. You know, they were the trendsetter. And Grant and Jay obviously were the ones. You can look back on the first episode and see how much they developed even as producers of the episodes compared to where it was started to even like season 3. I mean, it was amazing the amount of development that show took. And by the end, it was a well-polished machine that went on for 10, 11 years, something like that. So, but yeah, in the end, I mean, there's slightly produced elements to it, but it's still what it is, which is an investigation and a reveal, and here's what we found here kind of thing. So,
yeah, as much as people, I don't even know how to refer to myself anymore, because I used to refer to myself as someone who spent time investigating or an investigator, and I did for a while, or just even as a blogger and podcaster on paranormal things. As much as people roll their eyes at some of, that kind of thing in paranormal shows, we keep watching because, that stuff's real. And everybody just kind of knows about the, some of the stagey aspect of the client called and we're, and I just get over that stuff. And, it's like an addiction. I will still sit there and watch all these shows, even though sometimes I roll my eyes with it. But I cannot believe how many paranormal investigators out there will pretend like ghost hunters there's no connection with why they're in the field.
Right.
Oh, there's this show called Ghost Hunters. Oh, neat. I haven't seen it. And I'm like, oh, please.
Yeah.
Come on.
Yeah.
All of a sudden this show came out and then boof, thousands of paranormal teams.
Yeah. And
all
even
over the world.
You were talking about Ghost Adventures too, you know, and it was a different experience. There were some things that were the same. I mean, they came out, there was a reason for the investigation. They called us, same thing.
That was fairly recent though too. That's like 3 years ago or something.
Not even that. I think 2 years ago. Yeah. It was relatively recent, but it was the same situation in that they said we called them, but I mean, in the end, they called us and wanted to come out and investigate the place. And I have some friends through the paranormal that I think actually suggested us to them. I didn't know it was being suggested at the time. It wasn't a situation where I say, hey, tell them to come out. You know, it was just a situation where they came out for the first time and thought, wow, this is a really cool location, and suggested it to Zach and the rest of the crew on Ghost Adventures. And it was a really interesting experience, but in a different way. I mean, they run their ship, although it's similar. They don't have reveals at the end, like Ghost Hunters has. So they are definitely different in that manner. So you really don't know what you're going to get on their episodes until they actually just come out, whatever they kind of picked out. Because they're kind of, their entire episode is a constant reveal, right? I mean, they get a piece of evidence and, they're shocked
they
about
just
it.
Come
or whatever.
out and play.
Right. And then they replay it like 3 times in slow-mo and stuff like that, right? So you get to review it over the course of a minute, like 4 different times. You're like, oh, did I hear that? Oh, yeah, I heard it. After the 3rd or 4th time you hear it. But they're very different about how they do it. I will say that the lockdown is legitimate. I mean, when they come out, it really is only them out here. Now there is a producer in a central location with Jay, because at that time Nick was no longer on the show. So it was Jay and Billy and Aaron and Zach were out here. They have one location where they have someone watching the screens, and then there is a producer that's kind of keeping track of things. But honestly, they don't really talk to the producer that much. That producer is just there to put out fires or in case of emergency, you know? And I was out here at the time too, but my job was just basically, I was on a golf cart and I was running around the exterior of the property, and basically my job was just to make sure, kids didn't sneak on or something like that. There was a slight leak, right before they came out. Obviously you try to keep it quiet. I imagine
that's always tough.
Yeah, I mean,
they do a great job of always keeping that as quiet as they can.
Yeah, and when you're keeping secrets like that, I mean, Ghost Hunters, I knew they were coming for 4 or 5 months before they came, and Zach and those guys was probably 3-4 months as well. And I kept it from everybody. You just don't tell anybody. My wife knew, and that was about it. And
is there like a contract or anything saying that you could
there
say
is
anything?
Yeah, I mean, and you're just supposed to do your best to not let it out. The interesting part about Zach's episode 2, the Ghost Hunters episode or Ghost Adventures, episode that was out here, was that during the episode that they kind of had a built-in story element that popped up. And what happened was a kid drove up And,
oh, that's right.
yes. And basically he had his face blurred and he said, hey, listen, I used to go in this building when it was vacant, and I went in there and there was a pentagram in there, and I saw, I don't know, they said it was a decapitated cat or something like that, And interestingly enough, we are sitting in the room where that quote unquote pentagram was on the floor. And so the deal was that right over in that area over there, we had somebody had painted a pentagram on that floor. Probably just some kid that came in.
There's several things like that on the property where it's just,
Yeah. And so that probably had no idea nor clue what was with that. And then there was, I believe it was a beheaded bird or something was in that area too. But I think the bird was long dispatched before they ever beheaded the bird. So it was kind of like, this is my best guess at what Satan's altar might look like, and so it wasn't a very good job. But nonetheless, I knew what they were talking about when that person pulled up. And then of course, afterwards on the scene, you see him say, hey, can I take a picture with you guys? And Zach jokingly says, oh, well, can we blur our faces in the pictures, if we take the picture with you? And so, that was kind of a story element that was built in. And actually, one of my friends is Chip Coffey. He was a well-known psychic.
We love Chip.
He's been on the show, I think, as well.
Yeah.
And Chip was actually somewhat upset about that. And he even posted on social media just because he felt like it was a situation where the production of it made it look like there was something out here that might be evil or something like that, when in fact it never was. Mm-hmm. And, I guess my response to that, I agreed with Chip that I wasn't terribly pleased with it, but at the same time, it's one of those things that I understand that they're trying to build up the episode a little. And, I think most people realize when they see
with
that
the territory.
Yeah, that it's just part of the dramatization of it. And in the end, the most important and most impactful part of the episode on Ghost Adventures was when they got to go up in the ceiling and pull all the artifacts out, because I knew there were artifacts in there that hadn't been discovered in over 100 years.
And that's what made it way cooler than the Ghost Hunters episode. That was, and I've criticized Ghost Adventures, plenty of times before, even though I still watch them.
Right.
But that was a great episode, and that's why.
Yeah, it was fantastic. They came, and the deal was we had been gutting the ceilings up here on my own. I had been doing it for probably a month at least. And so when we pulled down the ceilings, we knew the areas where trash, for lack of a better description, would be at. And there was an area in one of the rooms that I told him, I said, this is where I've been finding stuff. And it was still intact. He says, hey, can we go and knock that out? And I think that part was on the episode, if I remember right. And I said, well, sure, you can, if you want to do my work, that's fine. I'm happy to let you go up there. And the cool part was, they got in there, and of course, Zach is very allergic to a lot of things. He's always got a mask on and stuff like that, or a ventilator, whatever it is. But anyway, he got up in that area, and he had like a hazmat suit on with the masks, and he had all the rest of the guys all masked up and suited up in white suits. It looked like, like something out of E.T. or something.
I was just going to say that. Yeah. The bubbles, all the plastic everywhere.
Yeah. And so he got up there, and they got their ladders, and they started whacking at the ceiling, and what you see on the episode is pretty much how it happened. There's no editing there. Literally 30 seconds into what they started whacking, they started finding the stuff. And I remember Zach like getting wild-eyed and looking back at me, and he just couldn't believe it. And I just lipped to him. I said, I told you. I didn't say it out loud because I wasn't supposed to be talking or wasn't supposed to be in that scene. I was behind the camera and not supposed to be there, but I said, I told you. And they went through and dug that out, and they filmed for about 30 to 40 minutes on that initial run where they pulled out tons of stuff in that first 30 to 40 minutes. The cool part is, it showed how interested Zach was in this. He did that and then took that stuff, and we went downstairs and we filmed the scene afterwards where there was all the stuff that we found laid out on the table. Yeah. And after that, we finished that scene, and Zach had, the crew, they had about 4 hours where they weren't going to be filming anything. They got what they want for that, and then they were going to come back and investigate. Zach wasn't done. He actually put on the suit, and they didn't film any of this, but Zach put on the suit by himself. The rest of the guys went off and had a smoke or ran to get some food and stuff like that. Zach put back on his suit, put back on his mask, and he went back upstairs. And for another hour and a half, Zach dug through the wall and by himself. I went up and checked on him after about 30 minutes, and
he was sucked in.
He was up on the ladder, and he said, I can't believe this. He says, this is the coolest thing I've ever done. Since I've been on the entire series. He's not this season, just ever, because he loves, and he's created that museum now where he has a lot of items from different haunted and historic places now. And his love for that kind of stuff is legitimate. I will tell you that, it's not a situation where he's just creating that because he thinks, I'm going to create this great museum and make lots of money. Sure, he probably wants to make some money and pay for his space. He bought a new house, or not a new house, but he bought a house out there to house this in. But he really loves all those kind of items. And he couldn't stop digging because he knew now that I had told him where those things were, he's like, there's more areas that need to be dug through. And so he went back and dug for another hour and a half into those walls because he wanted to find more stuff, and he just couldn't get enough of it. For all the things that are said about Zach sometime, every situation that I've dealt with him, I've found him to be a good guy. He's not the same off camera as he is on camera. I would say, the show, like we were talking about with the other shows, it's a little dramatized, but that's just the way it is. They're trying to create a story, trying to create some suspense within it. But off camera, Zach's very reserved. He's a very good guy. He's, much calmer. He's not reacting to everything like he's reacting to everything on camera.
I've heard that.
Yeah. And so, it's a different situation on and off the camera, and that doesn't make him a bad person, or it doesn't make it a bad show. That's just the way he does things on his show. And obviously he's doing something right because, his show is very successful. It's the last, remaining stalwart from a lot of those shows, so the Ghost Hunters has gone by the wayside, and there's several other shows that gone by the wayside, but Ghost Adventures is still, if you look at their season count, they have more seasons than the number of years they've been on TV. So they're pumping out, in some cases, more than a season a year.
I can't keep up on the DVR
right
with their shows. They're backed up.
Yeah. And so, it's an amazing situation he's created for him and the rest of the guys. Aaron was a fantastic guy, Aaron Goodwin. I loved him. He's very real, very personable. He's as he seems on camera. He's the kind of guy you'd want to go down to a bar or smoke a cigar with, and you'd have a wonderful time. And that's the way it is. And Billy and Jay, I got to meet some. Jay's wife was at the episode as well, but she was kind of in the background taking pictures. She would take pictures for the show so that later on when they had the promotional material, like the week or two before the episode, they have a lot of pictures from it. Well, Jay's wife was the one that was taking all those pictures. And then in later seasons, like in the last couple seasons, Jay's wife has actually popped up periodically having experiences while on the show. So that's something different. It's a small evolution of the show as they go along, where she wasn't on the camera before. Now she is some. So, and I don't know if she's involved with the show anymore or not, to be honest with you, but she's very nice too. So.
Yeah. Can you tell us about some of that other stuff that you've pulled out of the walls? Because I really do think that's fascinating. Some of the toys and some of the artwork in some cases that you've pulled out. Can you hit on just a few of them?
Yeah, we have some artwork. We have about 12 pieces of artwork, and they look like they're from two different artists. You can kind of tell two different styles of the art, and it's actually really good work. It's pretty amazing. You can tell it's most likely from a kid. Now, when I say a kid, it might be a teenager. It might be somebody younger than that, something like that. But it's really cool artwork. We have toys that we've pulled out of the walls, especially on the second floor more so. But things like Tinker Toys. We found a Hershey bar wrapper. We found it was a piece of the bottom of someone's jeans that was cut off. And we found that with a engineer's hat. And what we found out later was that people would cut off the bottom of jeans that were no good anymore and turn them into pockets, and they would put tobacco and things like that in there. So it was a way to carry their loose tobacco that they would later chew. They wouldn't usually roll it. It was more of a chewing tobacco. They would have different stuff. Like we also had a World War I canteen cover we found in the wall. I have no clue how that got in there. But it's really cool. It's a Army canteen cover, and I wish I had the canteen that go with it, but it was an amazing find. It's my favorite piece that we pulled out of the walls is the canteen cover, because it actually has initials on the bottom of it. So if I really wanted to dig, maybe I could track down or limit, because it's got 3 initials. So you would think, okay, first, middle, last. There's only so many that could have that combination, and then it has the unit that was that person was assigned to on there as well. So the number and stuff like that. So we have Odd Fellows stuff, some that's been donated, some we got from lodges in the area. The Odd Fellows are a dying organization, so a lot of the things that we have are from lodges that have failed, and ultimately they used to keep it and just give it to other lodges, but all the lodges that are left, they've got so much stuff they don't want any more of it. So it's a nice situation that they could give it to us and we can display it. And nice thing is that organization kind of lives on at some level in this building because we have those kind of things. And
Is that how you got George?
that is how I got George. Yes. Yeah.
George is the skeleton.
Yep. George is a skeleton. He died in the 1880s roughly and basically donated himself to science. And then, after that, he was put back together and donated to his local Odd Fellows Lodge. And so we happened to track him down in a lodge and happened to be an old one. And so we got very fortunate. And so we have something that a lot of the lodges didn't have. A lot of them just had paper mache skeletons. This was one of the really older ones that had an original skeleton. And of course, we don't know the name of the person, but we know that he was a member and that he donated his body to it. And they use that skeleton in rituals is what they do. They present the initiate,
That's not creepy at all.
Yeah. It's basically
just saying.
They present it to like the initiate and the initiate's blindfolded. And so they lift the blindfold and present the skeleton. And basically it's to present that person with their own mortality in the end and basically do what you can with your life. Cause eventually, you won't have a life. So you'll be gone. So
yeah. So if you come stay at the inn, you have to, realize that you're sleeping in the building with a human skeleton. Didn't think about that last night.
Yep.
So tell us about some of the events going on. There's always an event going on. And if you follow Chip Coffee or Amy Bruni and her, what's the name of her company?
Strange Escapes.
Strange Escapes.
Yeah, the website is strange-escapes.com.
Cool. And we talked a little bit about that when we interviewed Adam and Amy. But what's going on with Strange Escapes and Amy here? What are some of the things that go on?
Yeah, so Amy's coming out. It's an event somewhat similar to what you came out for a few years ago. They're doing a Strange Escapes event. It's the second weekend in April. And it's good lineup. If you like the paranormal, I mean, we have like the Newkirks, Dana and Greg. I don't know if you interviewed them.
Yep, love them.
They are wonderful. They have a museum of the occult and paranormal. It's a traveling museum, and they bring out some fantastic items. I mean, crazy looking dolls and idols and pieces of hair from people that you shouldn't be touching, and stuff like that. And so they have a fantastic display. And then we have John Tenney. Some people know John, some people don't, but he was on a show called Ghost Stalkers with Chad Lindbergh. It only had a run of 6 episodes, but it was actually a fantastic watch.
Yeah, we're going to try to get him on the show. I think you're going to try to bug him to see if he'll come on the show. Yeah.
Yeah, he's a great guy, super intelligent guy. He's big into investigating things. He's not limited to just the paranormal. I mean, he does things like UFOs and conspiracies. He even has a guy that he's met that he's writing a book right now. He actually got to meet an elf in the forest. And it's an amazing story, and I won't ruin it by telling it to you right now. But John met an elf in the forest and took a picture of it, and he's writing a book about his entire experience meeting the elf and later being friends with the elf. I'm just going to leave it at that. It sounds crazy as hell.
That's a person you want to get to know.
It is fantastic. I mean, and he will literally, we went to one of his conferences where he spent an hour and 15 minutes talking about nothing but this elf. And it was the most riveting talk of the entire seminar that we did. It was fantastic. So, I mean, John's great. And then Amy and Adam, I mean, Amy does all these events. She produces about 7 or 8 events each year at all, haunted locations all over the United States.
And this is like her favorite place, right?
She does like the wine.
Yes.
So yes, that's a good way to get her back over and over again. It's just a reminder that this is a winery, but and she actually did, we posted it on your, Seance Facebook page, but there is a live investigation out here, and she actually got some really cool evidence on the live Facebook investigation.
Really cool evidence.
Yeah.
An EVP with your daughter's names.
Yeah. She had ask the spirits if they knew the owner's kids. They came around and played very often if they happened to know know their names, and it was clear as a bell. I came across off the EVP, and it was Callie and Giselle, which is my 2 daughters' names. And my kids are good about being in a haunted location, but that caught them off guard. They were not expecting their names to come out in an investigation where Amy and Tenny were running around and doing those kind of things. So that was a pretty cool experience.
You can hear them. You still need to watch the video, but you can hear them scream from the top floor where they were trying to, be quiet as the investigation was going on. And so they had to tag their screams. Yes. But of course they screamed later because there was a delay in the feed. So it's hilarious. It's funny.
But and then one of the new people that we haven't had out before is coming out. And that's the Ghost Brothers. That's actually my younger daughter's favorite crew.
That's awesome.
I still am not great about all their names. My 8-year-old, if she was on this podcast right now, would be able to tell you exactly
what expert.
Yes, she would know all their names, and they are extremely entertaining. They follow a very similar. In fact, I think they're run by the same production company as Ghost Hunters, because it's called Ghost Brothers. It's got a similar name too. Yeah, Pilgrim Studios.
Pilgrim Studios. Mm-hmm. Yep.
Yeah, and so they follow the blueprint of a show, very similar to them. The difference is that these guys are a little more lighthearted about it, and I have not met any of them in person yet, but I've talked to Amy about the guys, and she said they're fantastic. They're very real, very personable, very nice guys. And so we're excited to have them out.
They give some much needed diversity in the paranormal world. So it's cool.
Yeah, and it's not just ethnic diversity, too. I mean, it's the diversity of how you go about investigating. You know, too often people are so serious about the paranormal, and it shouldn't be that way. And I know they're big into not taking it quite so seriously. I mean, there has to be a level of respect with, okay, you're dealing with the dead, but hey, the dead like to have fun, too, I figure. I mean, too often people worry, they say, oh, you're at a haunted orphanage, all those poor kids. Every time I've run into a ghost, they're usually laughing or running down the hallways or giggling or something like that. Nothing about my experiences out here tells me that they are doing nothing but enjoying what they're doing here. They probably aren't happy that they're dead, but they still enjoy what they're doing out here. And they must be here for a reason. I mean, clearly they like something about it. Worst case, it's probably a replay of a past event, and in that case, well, nobody's harmed. And then the other person, I'd be terrible if I didn't remember, Danielle from American Pickers is coming to the event.
Shut up.
So she's very interested in the paranormal. Everybody asks, well, why would she come to this event? Well, it's not a case of her necessarily being one of the main people involved in investigating stuff like that. It's just that she thinks it's a really cool situation.
She's a paranerd.
Yep. Yeah, she's absolutely a paranerd. And in the same token, she's very interested in history, obviously, from her what she does for a living and that kind of stuff. So, I mean, it falls right in line with what she likes. And I know her and Amy are good friends. And so it's exciting. I mean, we're not very far from Iowa, which is where they're located at. So, it's a short drive down, and her whole family's coming down to experience the weekend. So it'll be fun to have them down too. And then the event consists of, the first night will actually be fun. We're doing something different. We're having a meet and greet. So you get to meet all those people that I just listed. And then the cool part is after that, we're having a murder mystery dinner.
Oh, yeah. I've never done one of those.
And the cool part is that normally we do our murder mysteries dinner out here. We assign parts to like 10 of the people in the audience so that they have it. Well, in this case, we've assigned parts to all the honored guests that are showing up. So the Ghost Brothers are getting parts. The Danielle's getting a part. All these people are getting parts. And we even have a couple male people that are actually playing female parts. And I actually asked them if they wanted to do that before they did it, and then I assigned them to the parts. But it's called the Hamilton Homicide is what the...
Man, that will be entertaining.
Yeah, it's basically a spoof of the Hamilton plays, And so it'll be great that they'll come out. And the nice thing is they'll get to see the real side of some of these guys, I mean, too often, people get caught up in the hero worship of, I've seen them on TV and stuff like that. It'll make it real for them, that, they're just clowns just like us, And then Saturday of the event, we do like 8 hours of paranormal seminars, and then we do a 5-hour investigation where you get to investigate with them. And then we added something on Sunday, even this year, where we have people can come back out and review the evidence from the night before.
Oh,
so it's almost
cool.
it's almost like the Ghost Hunters episode a little.
Get to see all sides of it.
Yeah. So I think it's Amy and maybe Adam. We'll see if we can wake Adam up, but definitely Amy will be out here and doing a review of the evidence and stuff. and what happened. And they'll be able to ask questions about what happened the night before, different stuff they might be able to do. So it'd be a nice way to, do an after the fact kind of thing. And I think that'll be helpful to some of them who are interested in investigating in that kind of stuff. So.
Well, I know people can find out more about this for sure if they follow Belvoir Winery on Facebook. I know just about everybody does that. But where else, where could people go to learn more about Amy's events and getting out here to the Belvoir for that?
Yeah, just her website is strange-escapes.com. So if they go out there, that not only does it have the Belvoir event, but it has all the other events. She's got an event down at the Lighthouse in St. Augustine. She does an event every year up on the, I can't remember what the name of the island is, up in Michigan. What is that called?
Mackinac
Island. Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. So Mackinac Island, she does a big event up there with like a costume ball and stuff like that at that event. She does one up at Mount Washington, which I believe is up in New Hampshire. Really cool old building.
She does a cruise every now and then, right?
She does. Yeah. She's doing a cruise in, I think it's May this year, and it leaves out of New Orleans, which is really cool. They do a night of, I think they go out and check out haunted places and or the cemeteries in that area the night before they leave, and then the next day they leave on the cruise and go to some like Mexican ports and stuff like that where they have haunted locations, and so they get to go out and do that kind of stuff. And I've heard it's fantastic. We haven't been able to go on one yet, but we're definitely going to soon. So she has about, like I said, 8 or 9 events each year.
Yeah.
And I mean, it's an amazing experience. And each event she has different people, so it's not the same people each time. So you can pick out ones that you like that maybe are more attractive to you than others. So.
Awesome. You have any final Paranerd thoughts for us before you leave? Because I know you're about ready to go have some dinner.
That's right.
And have some more spirits, maybe.
That's right. No, I mean, I hope that people can come out and experience a place. I mean, we're kind of a hidden treasure of sorts, and we kind of like it that way. I don't want to be known too well, because then you just have too many people and it gets a little crazy. But it's a nice little hidden spot where, people can come and do romantic weekends, or they can just do, coming out and doing tastings and checking out the place and looking around the building and stuff like that. I mean, it's a great place to explore. And, people don't even have to like wine to come out here. I mean, that's the other wonderful part. I mean, we have families with kids that'll come out, and the kids are just interested in, they want to go to a haunted location, or they want to go to a historic location. They might necessarily be interested in paranormal stuff, but it's a nice place for people to come out and hang out. We do have we'll have an Easter egg hunt coming up as well. I don't have the exact date on that yet, but basically we put about 10,000 eggs out on the front lawn.
You have a massive lawn.
Yes. Yeah. And so we put about 10,000 eggs within the loop, the drive loop on our lawn, and then we turn loose about 250 to 300 kids. And the funny part is, well, number one, the Easter egg hunt lasts about 2 minutes and 15 seconds. They pick up 10,000 eggs. It's like locusts on a lawn, they just fly down it, and you're like, what in the world just happened, But the other cool part is that a lot of the parents will come out and they'll buy a bottle of wine and grab a chair and just sit back and have drinks while they're watching their kids pick up eggs and get candy. We give away free candy, so it doesn't cost anything. That's our one kids event of the year where we bring the kids out and do a family kind of thing. So
you do a lot of weddings on the lawn too.
Yeah, we do, 40 to 50 weddings a year, and it continues to grow. I mean, the nice thing is we have these new spaces up here where we can hold like 300 people for weddings. Before we could only do like around 120. So the nice thing is that we have these big spaces that we can offer for them. And obviously we're a unique location. We're not for everyone, but there's enough people that have a respect for, the history and the cool architecture out here that, they call them unique locations. They're actually the hottest piece of the wedding market right now, because a lot of people don't like, your prototypical ballroom in a hotel or something like that. They want something unique. And so nice thing about this is that we definitely provide a unique location. Right away when brides come in, whether they're interested or not. Some of them come in, you're like, oh, we're going to be able to get this one. And then there's some of them you come in and like, I don't have a chance. You just know, you can feel it. And, but that's all right. We don't have to land all the brides. We just have to land 40 to 50 a year. So it's neat. It's wonderful to be the part of, important moment for those kind of people. And then now at the inn, we're also getting return visits where they come back for their anniversaries and stuff like that.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. So that's pretty cool too.
And we were talking kind of, behind the scenes, we were talking this morning over breakfast about how you have a lot of same-sex weddings and gay weddings now too, which is kind of cool. That's kind of growing. And I love that.
Yep. Yeah.
Love
and it's a big industry, and I will be honest with you, there are some locations around here that still, if you tell them it's a same-sex marriage, they won't come out. And
Stigma.
Yeah, it's sad.
I don't know if stigma is the right word. Maybe it is.
Well, it's a bad situation. However you counter it, and the wonderful part is obviously it helps our business, because all those people then say, okay, well, that's one place I'm not going. And, I mean, we've always been open to all sorts of marriages. It doesn't really matter to us. I mean, we're hosting an event. You're paying for an event. I don't really care, what the situation is. I'm just here to make sure that you have a good experience, whatever it might be, and so while that's a bad situation that some people don't do that, we're happy that people come here and that they get a good experience, and, and then they tell other people, and we get more business out of it. So that's great.
And I appreciate that.
Yeah,
for sure.
Absolutely.
You rock, Jesse.
Thank you.
This has been awesome, and thanks for being an awesome host. And the wine is delicious. I'm sipping on Lucky Pierre, right?
Yes.
Lucky Pierre. It's a sweet red wine.
Yeah, I'm glad I could be your first live interview and your first live drink together.
Drink together.
Yeah, you didn't have to resort to those crazy sound effects.
Right.
You can just listen throughout the episode, and anytime you hear ice, Jesse's taking a drink.
There we go. So I that tells me right now, I didn't even think about that. Don't use the sound effects for this episode.
That's right.
Well, thank you, sir.
Yes, it was good to see you.
You too.
You're listening to the Big Seance Podcast with Patrick Keller. Look for us on iTunes and be sure to check out bigseance.com for more discussion.
Guess what? I didn't have the microphone on. So here we go. That's the first blooper. I didn't catch the first part of the interview. That's only slightly embarrassing. So I'm here with Keith from PRI, and he does investigations here at Belvoir, and he's done it for years. How long did you say? When did you start doing investigations here?
It's been 8 years now we've been doing here, since 2010.
And I just happened to be lucky enough to pick a weekend. Jesse, the owner here, said, oh my gosh, I forgot to tell you, they're doing some investigations this evening. And so I definitely wanted to catch an interview from Keith. And so I wanted him to have a chance to explain what they do here with investigations and the opportunities that people have if they want to sign up for one, and just, some of the things that happens here at Belvoir.
Well, they go to the winery's homepage to click on and find the investigations, which most normally are once a month, and they run from 8 o'clock to 1 in the morning. You should make certain, dress for if it's going to be cold out or warm or whatever, because you get the outside elements at all times. Be prepared. It's going to be dark. Wear good shoes and stuff like that. When you do come, you will go out with our people. You will have like 4 locations to go to. You go out with our investigators with different equipment. You go out about 45 minutes per round, come back, have a break, get to use the restroom and stuff like that. We'll have water here for you. But then you get to hear what each group at each location had happened to them. Then you rotate and go to the next location, and maybe some of that stuff you can get going again, what they might have.
So tell us the different locations that are here on the property that people get to investigate.
The first place, which is the modern nursing home, we go usually down to the morgue most of the time in there. Occasionally they'll be kind of wet. We won't go down there. We'll do the upper floor of that same building. Then the next building is the old folks home. Big, long hallways and stuff like that. You get to investigate that. Then the next building down is the hospital, which you get to go and do all the floors in there. Then we have one more, which is the bunker, which we take people out to, and they investigate in that location.
I was telling Keith, I had the opportunity to investigate with PRI, And I recognize you. So I don't remember if I was in your group or not, but it was here with Amy Bruni and Adam Berry. One of the first events here at Belvoir. And there was a lot of activity in the bunker that I remember, lots of flashlight activity. And I remember us being in a circle and singing songs and, trying to raise some spirits in there. And that was interesting. Also had some activity, I think, on the second floor of the old folks home. I had my spirit box, and I remember hearing a lot of responses and foul language, actually, come from there. And then before the inn, 3-4 years ago when we were here, Keith said that they're not able to investigate in the main building anymore, which makes sense. It's a fantastic inn now, but there was some crazy stuff on the second floor in one of the upper rooms with flashlights and things like that. It was really cool. So I'm staying here in the inn on the third floor, and I'm actually in room 5. And I know that you guys used to spend more time investigating in the upper floors. Do you know of anything that I might want to be? I have some, nerdy equipment up there. And is there anything I should be looking out for in the next 2 days?
If you have any K2s, I would set a couple of them up. Ask a few questions with those. We used to do really good with the K2s up there and the spirit box. Both of them we would do really good. The flashlights, we would get some up there with that. So you may try that also.
So when I was here 3 or 4 years ago, I was kind of embarrassed to bring, not a lot of people brought equipment, and I had some Sony night shots with me, and I was here by myself. So I was carrying a lot of stuff with me. And so, I had a spirit box that they were showing people how it worked, and that was cool that they were using my spirit box. But pretty much the whole night, I went through 4 8mm videotapes. And I remember I thought it was so cool because I was talking to Adam and Amy and had them on Night Shot. And I was, talking about how I was going to take screenshots of that. And so I don't know how many hours of video I had from that. And I even watched some of it out in the parking lot that weekend before I left. So I knew I had it on tape, and I'd played it back. And I got home and was getting ready to import all the video on my computer, and every tape was blank, completely blank. And there were tapes that I had used before. So, in theory, you should, at the end of a tape, you should have the last investigation you did. The whole thing was snow, each tape. And it didn't matter what, because I had like 4 Sony night shots. It didn't matter what camera I put it in. Nothing. And so I actually have talked to Amy and Adam since then and interviewed them and was telling them about it. And I joke around about how it was a conspiracy, like maybe because Adam and Amy don't want to be, on video. They have some like magnetic tape eraser or something that they wanded me with and erased the video. Do you have any experiences with tapes being erased or anything like that?
I've actually had a couple of people. It's been some years back, but they had the exact same thing that you're describing. And like they said, there should have been part of the other because they recorded over a used tape, and there should have been, and the whole thing was blank. And that's the only experience I've heard of anybody. So I have heard of that before. What causes it? I don't know.
So I've just wondered if the spirit activity here is just so strong that it just sucks energy and erases tapes. Do you ever get battery drainage or anything like that?
Lot of battery drainage. Many a times they go out, brand new. They put them in here, open the packages, put them in, check. It shows full power. They get out there and it can be gone in just minutes.
Cool. So do you want to tell us anything else about PRI? Maybe some of the other stuff you do outside of Belvoir and anything else you want to share with us?
Well, at the moment, the locations that we're doing right now, the winery here, occasionally we get down to Ray County Museum and we'll do investigations down there with Linda. That's a wonderful location. You can't do the larger numbers of people, but having smaller groups and go there, it's really fun.
Is there like a Facebook page or something they go to, or is it just the site here for Belvoir?
The site here.
Keith, you rock.
Thank you very much.
For show notes, including links to anything we may have mentioned in this episode, visit bigseance.com. You can find and subscribe to the show in Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Stitcher, Google Play Music, TuneIn Radio, iHeartRadio, and just about anywhere podcasts are found. Do you have any comments or feedback? Go to bigseance.com/feedback to learn how to get your voice in a future show. Or you can call my feedback line, 7755-TELL-ME. That's 775-583-5563. Interested in learning how to promote and share the podcast? Go to bigseance.com/share. Thank you so much for listening. Unfortunately, it's time to blow the candles out, but we'll see you and light them again next time.
Your Paranerd hashtag for this week is easy. So to prove you made it this far and are a true Paranerd, find me on Twitter at Big Seance and also tag Belvoir Winery at Belvoir Winery and use the hashtag Belvoir Winery. That's BELVOIR Winery. Easy enough, right? See ya.